we've studied the cosine and sine function. Now we're going to look at phase shifts. So phase shift is when you move the function left or right. So in this function right here, we did the Desmos activity where we found that the absolute value of A makes the amplitude. And it also tells you if it reflects over the x-axis. So if A is negative, it's going to, if it's negative and it's a negative sine function, it's going to go like this. If it's a negative cosine function, it's going to start down, okay, at the minimum value. So positive sine function looks like this. Negative and positive cosine function looks like this. So that's what A does. B, right here, is it tells you the period. So 2 pi divided by B is the period. H is the phase shift. So it's going to tell you whether it's going to move left and right. And K tells you if the function has shifted up or down. So when you graph, the steps I use to graph is I want you to look at your K value to move the function up or down. So I do that first. Then I mark my amplitude based on the horizontal line that I drew, or the horizontal lines I drew in step 1. Then I'm going to move my function right or left using the H value, which is the phase shift. I'm going to mark a cycle by finding the period and break my cycle into 4 parts, and then I'm going to sketch my graph. So before we start sketching graphs, write a function for each transformation. So you're going to take this cosine function, you're going to move it up 2, left 3, and reflect it across the x-axis. So because it's been reflected, it's going to be a negative, and it doesn't specify that the amplitude has been changed. So it's going to be negative cosine, but I'm moving left 3 units, so it's going to be x plus 3, and then I'm going up 2, so plus 2. So whatever is moving left and right goes with the x. So because this formula up here was x minus h, right's going to be positive and left is going to be negative because there's a negative out in front. Okay, second one, sine, it's going right pi over 2. So it's going to be y equals, and it doesn't read anything about reflecting across the x-axis. So it's going to be sine of x plus or minus pi over 2 because it's moving right. And then it's down 5, so minus 5. So you want to make sure that you put whatever your phase shift is in parentheses. And then the last one, you got 5. Oh, it's reflected across the x-axis, so it's going to be negative 5 sine. And it's going left pi over 4, so it's going to be x plus pi over 4. And then it's up 1 unit, so it's plus 1. So over here, we're going to graph them. So when I graph, I want to specify what the period is, what the amplitude is, and the phase shift, and the vertical shift. So in this case, the amplitude is 2. The b value is the coefficient of x, so the period's 2 pi divided by b, divided by 1, so the period's 2 pi. The phase shift is going to be right, because phase shift means right and left, right pi over 4. And the vertical shift is up 1. So you need to start by going up 1. Okay, start your function by thinking about, instead of starting my function on the x-axis and using my amplitude, I'm going to start up. So start up, and I'm going to do this with a dash line. Okay, so now from the dash line, I'm going to apply my amplitude of 2. So I'm going to go up 2 units, and I'm going to go down 2 units from my new horizontal line. My phase shift is right pi over 4. So that means I'm going to start my cosine function at pi over 4. And my period's 2 pi. So because I have moved right 2 pi, or pi over 4, after 2 pi, I'm going to move right pi over 4. So I'm going to end it right here. So I'm going to have one cosine cycle in between here and here. And this is a positive cosine, so that means it's going to start at the max. So I'm going to break up my period, or my cycle, into fourths, right here. And remember, the cosine, if cosine's positive, it's going to start at the max. But instead of starting the max right here, it has shifted over to the right. So I'm in green, I'm going to do max, 0, min, 0, max. So my graph looks like this. And I'm going to keep it going on the other side. So I have a mark every other one. So it's going to be max, 0, min, 0, max, 0. So there's my graph. So if instead of starting right here, I have moved it right pi over 4 and up 2, and it was cosine that was positive, so I'm starting up here. So now I'm going to do the second one. So first, the amplitude is 1. The period, the number in front of x, the coefficient of x is still 1, so the period's still 2 pi. The phase shift is right pi over 2, so I'm going to write right pi over 2. And then the vertical shift is down 3. So just like the other one, I'm going to start by making a dashed line of down 3. And then I'm going to make my amplitude up 1 and up 1 and down 1 from this new, almost like an axis, this dashed line. My phase shift is right pi over 2, so I'm going to start the sine function right here where the red line starts. So I can also move pi over 2 over from 2 pi. So one cycle of the sine is going to be in between here and here. It's going to be a negative sine function, so that means that it's going to start at the 0 and go down. So I'm going to break this up into fourths, and I'm going to start in the middle, because remember sine starts in the middle on the axes, and it's going to go 0, min, 0, max, 0. And I can complete it on the other side. 0, max, 0, min, 0, max. Okay, so that's how you do the phase shift. So start where your vertical is, the vertical shift is. Sometimes it's not shifted at all. So make that a dashed line or a different color. Then apply your amplitude, so go up and down from here. Start your phase shift, and then do one cycle, and then copy it over on the other side. So on this, I'm going to write cosine and sine functions for each of these. So first, I'm going to identify the period. So the period, if my sine function starts right here, so the period is going to be pi. And then my amplitude is from up and down, I'm going, this is 5 units, so I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the height of the wave is 8, so my amplitude is going to be 4. And my phase shift is not moved left or right. So my phase shift is none. And my vertical shift is I've moved it down 3, so it's negative 3. So again, I have to find my b to write the equation. So period equals 2 pi over b, so b must be 2. So I'll write b is 2. This is a positive sine function because it's starting here and going up. So now I can write my equation. So my equation is going to be y equals, amplitude is 4, it's a positive sine function, so it's 4 sine, b is 2, 2x, there's no phase shift, so I don't have to worry about parentheses, and then it's going to be minus 3. So don't put x minus 3 in parentheses because negative 3 needs to be the constant. So the second one, the period is pi. The amplitude is, the height's 2, so it's 1. The phase shift, it hasn't shifted left or right. And the vertical shift is starting at 5. So my equation is going to be y equals, and it's a positive sine function, so it's going to be sine of 2x, because b is 2, just like our other one before, plus 5. Okay, down here I'm going to do cosine functions. So the period is 2 pi. The amplitude is 1. A cosine function has a maximum starting out. So this hasn't shifted at all either. The vertical shift is it has moved down 2. So if your period's 2 pi, b is 1. So, and this is a positive cosine function. So my equation is going to be y equals cosine. So cosine of x and then minus 2 because you shifted it down 2. And the last one, so cosine starts in the middle. It's going to be a this has a phase shift. I was going to say it's a sine function, but really cosine and sine are the same. They're just translations of each other. So if this has to be a cosine function, my period is 2 pi. My amplitude is going from negative 2 to 4, so it's 6. So half of that is 3. If this is a cosine function, I'm gonna actually make this the starting point. So you could either make this or this the starting part. It doesn't matter. I'm gonna make the starting point right here. So it means that it has moved right pi over 2 because it's between 0 and pi. So I'm going to write right pi over 2. The vertical shift is it's moved up 1. So my equation is going to be y equals, this is a negative cosine function because if I start right here, I'm starting down. You could have also written a positive cosine function and start up and shifted it left pi over 2, but I'm going to use this one. So it's going to be negative, and the amplitude is 3 cosine of right pi over 2 is going to be x minus pi over 2, and then plus 1.